Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are really getting into something foundational. We're looking at the very first chapter of Daniel Kahneman's huge book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah, it's hard to overstate how important this book is, really. It just gives such a clear way to think about how our minds actually work, based on decades of solid research.
Absolutely. And what we want to do in this deep dive, our mission, is to really unpack the core idea right from the start. This revolutionary concept of two different systems driving our thinking.
That's right.
We're going to introduce you to these two, let's call them characters in your mind. We'll look at how they operate, what they're good at, what they're not so good at, how they work together, and importantly, how they sometimes, well, clash.
hmm It's really about understanding the mechanics behind your own thoughts and decisions.
Think of it as getting a backstage pass to your own mind. By the end, you should have a much better feel for why some things feel effortless, and why others need real concentration.
And maybe why your gut feeling is sometimes spot on, but other times, maybe not so much. It's a deep dive into you.
Getting to know the mental neighbors. Okay, let's get into this core idea from the source.
Right. So the central idea, and Kahneman credits other psychologists too, is that our minds have these two basic modes of operation, two ways of thinking. He gives them very simple names, System 1 and System 2.
Just system one and system two.
Yeah. And importantly, they're not like actual physical bits of the brain. They're more like useful labels, shorthand, for these different ways we process information. Useful fictions, he calls them.
Useful fictions, I like that. System one and system two, they might sound a bit dry, but they have very different personalities, right? Let's start with system one. How does the source describe this one, the fast one?
Okay, so based purely on what's in the chapter, System 1 is automatic. It operates really quickly.
Right.
And crucially, it takes little or no effort on our part.
No effort.
Right. And there's no feeling of voluntary control. It just sort of happens. It kicks in automatically.
Yeah. So it's involuntary, kind of, like blinking maybe, but for thoughts.
It's a sense, yeah. It's the source of our impressions, our feelings, those intuitions that just pop into mind. And these aren't just random noise. These impressions and feelings are actually the main starting point for the more deliberate beliefs and choices that System 2 makes later.
Ah, okay. So system one provides the raw material,
Yeah.
the gut reaction.
Exactly. It's constantly generating this input, this stream of suggestions, whether we consciously ask for it or not.
And it's pretty sophisticated, isn't it? Not just basic stuff.
Surprisingly so. The source says it can generate quite complex patterns of ideas, make connections very quickly. But here's a key limitation Kahneman points out. It can't think in orderly steps. It doesn't follow a sequence like logic. It's more about associations happening all at once.
Okay, so fast, automatic, effortless, no control, generates impressions, feelings, sees patterns, makes connections, but no step-by-step logic. And you said it just happens.
Yeah, and maybe the biggest thing is you can't turn it off. System 1 is always on. As long as you're awake, it's constantly scanning the environment, interpreting things, making associations, processing information in the background, like an always-on surveillance system plus intuition generator.
Wow, always running. That's system one. Okay, so how does system two compare? It must be pretty different.
Fundamentally different. If System 1 is automatic, System 2 is all about effort. It allocates attention, that's the key word, to mental activities that demand it. Things like complex calculations.
And this is the one we feel is us.
That's right. Its operations are tied very closely to our subjective experience of, agency, of making a choice, of concentrating, of deciding. When you think, I am thinking or I decided, that's usually your System 2 you're feeling.
The conscious reasoning self, the part that holds beliefs, makes deliberate choices, decides what to focus on.
Precisely. It's the deliberate thinker. It gets called in when System 1 gets stuck or when something surprising happens that System 1 can't easily explain.
So when the automatic system hits a wall, system two takes over the heavy lifting.
Exactly. Or when System 1 just doesn't have an answer ready. And according to the source, if there's a conflict between the two, System 2 usually gets the final say. It can override System 1's impulses. And unlike System 1, System 2 can think in steps. It can follow rules, work through logic, compare options deliberately.
Okay, let me try to summarize. System one, fast, automatic, intuitive, always on, effortless, involuntary, gives impressions, bad at logic. System two, slow, effortful, deliberate, conscious, needs attention, makes choices, does logic, can override system one. That's quite the contrast.
Yeah, it really is.
The source gives some great examples early on to make this really clear, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, they're very vivid. The first one is that picture of an angry woman. When you look at it, it's not just seeing lines and shapes. The source says it's a seamless blend of seeing and intuitive thinking.
You see her face, obviously, but System 1 instantly adds the meaning.
Right. You just know she's angry. Immediately. No conscious thought needed. System 1 sees the facial expression, matches it to stored patterns about emotions, and bam, impression. Anger.
And it goes further, right? You kind of anticipate what might happen next.
Exactly. System 1 effortlessly pulls up related ideas. You might get a sense she's about to say something harsh or shout. These aren't things you deliberately deduce. They just come associated with the anger impression. And the key phrase from the source is that this reaction just happened to you. It didn't feel like something you did.
Right, not like you decided to analyze her expression.
No. That's System 1 in action. Fast thinking. Automatic interpretation and prediction rolled into one effortless package. It shows how System 1 gives us this quick, rich read on our social world.
Okay, contrast that with the other big example, the math problem, 17 times 24. What happens when you see that?
Well, interestingly, System 1 does give you something immediately. You recognize its multiplication.
Yeah.
You know you could probably solve it with pen and paper, or maybe even in your head if you tried. And System 1 gives you a rough sense of the answer's size. Intuitively, that 12,609 is way too big, and 123 is way too small. Maybe 500-ish feels plausible. It's like an instant ballpark estimate.
But it doesn't give you the actual answer, 408.
Not for most of us, no. To get that, you hit a decision point. Am I going to put in the mental effort? And if you say yes, that's when System 2 engages.
Okay, now the effort kicks in.
Right. You deliberately retrieve the multiplication procedure from memory. You start executing the steps. Okay, 4 times 7 is 28. Put down the 8, carry the 2. Then 4 times 1 is 4, plus the 2 is 6, so 68. Then the next line.
And you feel that effort, right? It's not automatic at all.
Absolutely. The source describes it as subjective strain.
Yeah.
Mental work. You feel the burden of holding those numbers, the carry 2, the 68, in your working memory, keeping track of where you are in the steps. It demands concentration. It's deliberate. It's effortful. It's orderly. This is the classic example of slow thinking. System 2 doing its thing.
It's the part that can follow a recipe, basically,
Yep.
but it costs energy.
It does. And the source points out something really cool. Your body gets involved. When you're deep in that calculation, your muscles might actually tense up a bit. Your blood pressure, your heart rate, they can increase. And your pupils.
They get wider, dilate.
They dilate. It's a measurable physical sign of the mental effort System 2 is putting in. And as soon as you finish the problem, or even if you just give up, they shrink back to normal.
Wow. So even thinking hard is physically demanding in a way.
It shows that mental effort isn't just some abstract thing. It has a real physical footprint. So yeah, angry woman. System 1 instant, effortless, intuitive, 17 by 24. System 2 slow, effortful, deliberate, feels like work, even shows up physically. Really nails the difference.
It absolutely does. Okay, so let's dive a bit deeper into System 1 now. You said it's always on, doing all sorts of things automatically. What's the range of its activities?
It's incredibly broad. The source lists a whole bunch, kind of in order of complexity. Simple stuff first, like instantly judging that one object is further away than another, or automatically turning your head towards a sudden loud noise.
Or finishing common phrases, like someone says salt and...
Pepper. Yeah, your mind just fills it in. Or making that yuck face if you see something disgusting. Detecting hostility in someone's voice, even over the phone. Answering really basic math like 2 plus 2.
4, yeah, that's instant.
Reading words on big billboards as you drive past.
Yeah.
You don't choose to read them, you just do. For an experienced driver, driving a car on an empty road becomes mostly System 1. Steering, adjusting speed. It's automatic.
Ah, right. Frees up your mind.
Exactly. For a chess grandmaster, finding a really strong move in a familiar position, that can be System 1 intuition. They just see it. Understanding simple sentences in your own language is pure System 1.
And recognizing stereotypes. The source mentions that example.
Yeah, like if you read a description, a meek and tidy soul with a passion for detail, System 1 might instantly suggest librarian or maybe accountant based on stored cultural associations. It's all quick, automatic output.
So where do all these abilities come from? Are we just born with them?
Well, some seem to be innate, yeah. Things we share with other animals, probably hardwired for survival. Basic perception, recognizing objects, orienting attention, avoiding obvious dangers, maybe even a fear of spiders or snakes for some people. That seems built in.
The real basics of interacting with the world.
Right. But a huge amount of what System 1 does becomes fast and automatic through learning and practice. Think about learning the capital of France. At first, you have to think, maybe look it up. After enough repetition, Paris just comes instantly. That's a learned association becoming automatic.
Like learning to read. That's hard work at first.
Exactly. Reading starts as a very effortful System 2 task for a child. But with practice, it becomes completely automatic, effortless System 1 for proficient readers. Same for social skills, understanding subtle cues, knowing how to behave in different situations, riding a bike, tying your shoes. Deliberate actions that become automatic habits.
And then you have those super specialized skills, like the chess master. That takes massive practice.
Thousands of hours, yeah.
Yeah.
That dedicated practice builds up this huge library of patterns that System 1 can recognize instantly. Whereas other automatic skills, like recognizing those cultural stereotypes, are more widely shared because they depend on language and knowledge most people in a culture pick up.
So System 1 is both innate abilities and this vast library of learned skills and associations.
That's the idea. All this knowledge is stored away, and System 1 accesses it instantly without you even trying or intending to. The big insight is that System 1 isn't just basic reflexes, it's also incredibly skilled and knowledgeable, thanks to learning and practice.
And you mentioned some of its actions are totally involuntary. You really can't stop them.
Some, yeah. You literally cannot understand a simple sentence spoken in a language you know fluently. Try it. You can't help but orient to a loud, unexpected sound. You can't stop yourself from knowing 2 plus 2 before, or that Paris is linked to France. It's automatic.
Even things we can technically control, like chewing or driving on that empty road, usually just run on autopilot.
Right. System 1 handles them by default because it's efficient. System 2 only needs to get involved if something unusual happens or if you need to make a conscious change.
It really sounds like System 1 is doing almost everything in our daily lives.
It handles a massive amount very efficiently. And there's an interesting interplay with attention that involuntary orienting System 1 does, like jumping at a loud bang that automatically grabs System 2's attention.
Ah, so System 1 flags things for System 2.
Kind of. System 1 sounds the alarm saying, hey, pay attention to this. Then System 2 can decide whether to keep focusing on it, figure out what the noise was, or deliberately shift attention somewhere else by concentrating hard on something else. But that initial grab, that's pure System 1. It's like the first responder directing where System 2 might need to focus its limited resources.
Okay, so System 1, the busy, automatic, intuitive engine, always running, interpreting, associating, mostly behind the scenes. Now let's swing back to System 2, the effortful one. What kinds of activities fall under its domain?
Well, the common thread, the defining feature, is that they all require attention. And if you take that attention away, the activity just falls apart.
Like bracing for the starter's gun in a race. That takes intense focus, right? Or trying to pick out one specific voice in a really noisy room, like at a party. That's hard work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Or actively searching your memory. Not like System 1 instantly giving you Paris. This is when System 2 has to deliberately go looking, like scanning a crowd for someone specific, say, find a man with a white beard, or trying to list all the capital cities you know that start with N. Or remember the plot of that French existentialist novel you read last year. That's a conscious, effortful search.
Okay. What else? Trying to walk faster than your normal, comfortable pace?
Yeah, maintaining an unnatural speed takes effort. Actively monitoring your own behavior, like in a job interview or meeting your partner's parents for the first time, making sure you're acting appropriately, saying the right things, that takes System 2 monitoring.
Counting things. The source mentions counting the letter A on a page. That sounds simple, but it's actually quite demanding.
It really is.
Yeah.
Reciting your phone number from memory when someone asks. Parking a car in a tight spot for most people, that requires real concentration. Comparing complex options, like trying to choose between 2 washing machines based on features and price. Filling out your tax return? Ugh.
Definitely System 2. And checking a complicated argument for logical flaws. All things that need you to really focus.
You have to pay attention, as the saying goes. If you try to do these things while distracted, or if your mind wanders, you'll mess up or just stop making progress.
But System 2 isn't just about reacting to hard tasks, is it? It can also set things up for System 1.
Yes, exactly. It has this really interesting ability to program the automatic functions of System 1, particularly attention and memory. It can tell System 1 what to look out for.
Like the example of looking for someone specific at the train station. Say your friend who always wears a bright yellow hat.
Right. You use your System 2 to set the goal, find yellow hat. This primes your System 1's visual system. It makes it much more likely that a yellow hat will just pop out at you from the crowd. The spotting feels automatic when it happens, but System 2 set the stage.
Or the example of driving on the wrong side of the road when you're abroad.
Perfect example. The rental agent says, remember, drive on the left. That instruction has to be actively maintained by your system 2. You have to constantly think left side, especially at turns, to override your deeply ingrained system 1 habit of driving on the right. It takes continuous mental effort to keep that system 2 instruction active.
That phrase, pay attention, really captures it. The source talks about having a limited budget of attention, right?
Exactly. It's a finite resource. You can choose how to spend it, allocating it to different mental tasks. But if you try to do too much effortful stuff at once, you exceed the budget. You simply can't do it, or performance crashes.
Which is why doing two hard things at once is basically impossible.
Pretty much. They interfere because they're competing for the same limited pool of attention. That's why you can't and definitely shouldn't try to calculate 17 times 24 in your head while making a tricky left turn into oncoming traffic. System 2 just doesn't have the bandwidth for both.
So, true multitasking, mostly a myth unless the tasks are easy.
Essentially, yes. It only really works if at least one of the tasks is so easy and well-practiced that System 1 can handle it automatically, like having a casual chat while driving on a straight, empty highway if you're an experienced driver. System 1 does the driving, System 2 does the talking.
I think every parent has had that experience of reading a kid's book on autopilot while thinking about work emails. Maybe feeling a bit guilty about it.
We've all been there. But try having a really complex, serious conversation while trying to follow intricate instructions or write something important. It just breaks down. Your System 2 can't split its focus effectively.
Even other people seem to get this intuitively. Like passengers in a car often go quiet when the driver's doing something difficult.
You know, like merging onto a busy motorway or parallel parking. They sense the driver needs all their attention, that they might be temporarily deaf to conversation. It's like this unspoken social understanding of System 2's limits. The insight here is that System 2, while powerful for specific tasks, is a bottleneck. It's easily overloaded, which explains why we rely on System 1 so much and why distractions are so disruptive to hard thinking.
That social acknowledgement of the limits is a great observation. And speaking of intense focus having weird effects, the source brings up that incredible demonstration, the invisible gorilla experiment.
Ah, yes, from Trabruce and Simons, it's just such a stunning illustration of inattentional blindness. Really drives home the point about attention limits.
Can you walk us through the setup for anyone who hasn't encountered it?
Sure. People watch a short video clip.
Mm-hmm.
In the clip, there are two teams, one team wearing white shirts, the other black shirts. They're moving around passing basketballs to each other. Now, the viewers are given a very specific, demanding task. They have to count the total number of passes made only by the players wearing white shirts. And they're explicitly told to ignore the players in black shirts.
Right, so counting one thing while actively ignoring another, that sounds tailor-made for System 2 effort. Needs focus.
It absolutely is. It's designed to fully absorb System 2's attention. So while people are carefully counting these passes, something unusual happens. A person dressed in a full gorilla costume walks slowly right into the middle of the players, stops, turns to the camera, thumps its chest, and then walks off the other side.
That gorilla, how long is it on screen for?
It's clearly visible for about 9 seconds. Smack bang in the middle of the action.
9 seconds. Surely everyone sees a gorilla walking through a basketball game. It's absurd.
You would absolutely think so.
Yeah.
But here's the mind blower. In study after study with thousands of participants, roughly half of the people, about 50%, do not notice the gorilla
I
at
think
all.
half they don't see it, even though it's right there.
They are completely unaware it was ever there. They are effectively blind to it, despite it being right in front of their eyes.
Wow. How does that happen?
Well, the source explains it directly in terms of the two systems. The counting task, especially the instruction to ignore the black team, totally consumed System 2's limited attention budget. System 2 was so focused on tracking white shirts and suppressing black shirts, it had no resources left over to process anything else, even something as bizarre and unexpected as a gorilla.
So, System 1, the visual system, probably registered the image of the gorilla.
Almost certainly. The light hit the retina, the basic visual processing happened. But for that information to reach conscious awareness, for System 2 to notice it and say, whoa, a gorilla, System 2 needs to allocate some attention to it. If the attention budget is already maxed out on the main task, the gorilla remains, well, invisible to the conscious mind.
But if you watched the video without that counting task, you'd see the gorilla immediately.
Absolutely. No one misses it if they're just watching normally. Now, here's the part that the source says is maybe even more remarkable. It's the reaction of the people who missed it.
What happens when you tell them?
They are typically stunned. Often they flat out deny it. No, there was no gorilla. They are absolutely certain it wasn't there and are shocked when shown the video again.
So they don't just miss it, they don't know they missed it.
Exactly. And that's the crucial double insight from the source. One, we can be blind to the obvious when our attention is elsewhere. Two, we're also blind to our own blindness. We don't have a good sense of what we're not perceiving. We're often completely unaware of the limits of our own attention.
That is deeply unsettling, actually. Our subjective experience feels so complete, but it might have huge holes in it.
It's a very powerful demonstration of System 2's limitations and the consequences. Okay, so we have these two systems, System 1 and System 2, always active and very different. How do they generally interact day to day? When do things run smoothly, and when does conflict arise?
What's the usual plot, as the source puts it?
The basic story is, System 1 and System 2 are both awake when you are. System 1 runs automatically, constantly generating suggestions, impressions, feelings, intentions. System 2 is usually just ticking over in a low-effort mode, kind of monitoring things, not using much of its full capacity.
So System 1 is doing most of the moment-to-moment processing.
Pretty much. It throws up these suggestions based on what it perceives and associates. And then, if System 2, the conscious bit, basically nods them through, endorses them with little or no change, those suggestions become your actual beliefs or lead to voluntary actions.
So the default is System 2 just accepting what System 1 offers up?
Yeah, most of the time. It's a really efficient setup. System 2 doesn't have to constantly reevaluate everything from scratch. It trusts System 1's quick take, and you just go with your impressions and intuitions. And honestly, in familiar, everyday situations, this works remarkably well. System 1 is generally accurate, its predictions are good, its reactions are fast and usually appropriate.
But System 2 is there as a backup or a supervisor.
Precisely. System 2 ramps up its effort when System 1 hits a problem it can't solve easily, like that 17 by 24 calculation, or when System 1 simply doesn't have a ready answer. And, very importantly, it gets triggered by surprise.
Surprise.
Yeah, when something happens that violates System 1's model of how the world is supposed to work. You know, if you saw your desk lamp suddenly hop across the room or heard a cat bark or...
Saw a gorilla on a basketball court.
Exactly. Those kinds of anomalies grab System 2's attention, assuming some attention was available, as the gorilla shows.
Yeah.
They make System 2 wake up and try to figure out what's going on. System 2 also handles that continuous monitoring. We talked about self-control, being polite when you don't feel like it, staying focused when driving tired.
And it catches potential mistakes.
Yes. It gets mobilized when it detects that System 1 is maybe about to lead you into an error. Think about that moment you bite your tongue just before saying something cutting or inappropriate that popped into your head. That's System 2 intervening, applying effort to stop an impulsive System 1 response.
Okay, so System 1 does the bulk automatically. System 2 supervises, solves problems, handles surprise, enforces self-control, and tries to catch errors, usually having the final say.
It's a division of labor that's highly efficient. It minimizes effort by letting the fast system run the show most of the time, conserving System 2's limited energy for when it's really needed. It optimizes performance.
But System 1, for all its efficiency, isn't flawless. The source stresses its limitations.
Oh, absolutely. System 1 is prone to biases, systematic errors it makes in predictable situations. It also has this tendency to answer an easier question than the one you actually asked it, a kind of mental substitution, without you even noticing. And it's famously bad with logic and statistics. It prefers plausibility and coherence over actual probability.
And that always-on feature, the lack of an off switch, that's a limitation too.
Definitely. Like we said, you automatically read words you see in your language, even if you're trying not to. You orient to sounds automatically. These things happen whether you want them to or not, and sometimes that automatic processing can interfere with what you're trying to do.
Which leads directly to conflict between the systems. The source has that great example, Figure 2, kind of like a Stroop test.
Right. In that task, you see columns of words, and you're told to do something unnatural with them. Either say if the word itself is printed in upper or lowercase, or say if the word is positioned on the right or left side of the page.
So you're not supposed to read the word itself.
Exactly. Your System 2 has to set up this unusual rule, focus on the case or focus on the position, and say the corresponding response word, upper, lower, right, left. That takes System 2 effort to maintain that instruction set.
Now, sometimes the word matches the task, right? Like the word upper actually printed in uppercase, or the word left printed on the left.
Yeah, that's the easy condition. Your System 1 automatically reads the word upper or left, and that automatic reading actually helps you perform the System 2 task faster. They're congruent.
But the conflict comes when they don't match. like the word lower printed in uppercase or the word right printed on the left.
That's when you feel it. You slow down. You might hesitate, maybe even make a mistake. You feel this internal friction.
I know that feeling. It's like your brain is trying to go in two directions at once. My system 2 is trying hard to say uppercase, but my system 1 just instantly read the word lower, and that automatic reading is getting in the way, fighting the instruction.
That's it, exactly. It's the subjective experience of conflict. System 2 is trying to impose its rule, but it has to actively suppress the stronger, faster automatic response from System 1. And this kind of conflict happens all the time in real life.
Like trying not to stare at someone who looks very unusual on the train. System 1 automatically draws your attention, but System 2 has to work hard to look away politely.
Or trying to concentrate on reading a really dense, boring textbook. Your System 2 is trying to focus, but System 1 keeps suggesting more interesting things, like checking your phone or daydreaming. It takes effort to keep bringing your attention back.
Or that driving advice for icy roads, steer into the skid. Your System 1 instinct is probably to slam the brakes or yank the wheel the other way. System 2 has to deliberately override that strong but wrong impulse.
Or, as the source puts it, deciding not to tell someone off when you're really angry, even though System 1 is screaming at you to let them have it. All these are examples of System 2 exerting effort to overcome or control a powerful System 1 impulse. The source explicitly says, one of System 2's main jobs is overcoming System 1's impulses. System 2 is in charge of self-control.
Ah, so self-control is System 2 winning that fight against System 1. That makes a lot of sense. It feels like effort because it is effort.
Precisely. And it's a limited resource. Now, beyond these conflicts, System 1's automatic nature can also lead to illusions, not just visual ones, but illusions of thought, too.
Cognitive illusions. How does the source illustrate that? It uses the Muller-Lyer visual illusion first, right?
Yeah, the famous one with the two lines in the fins, figure 3 in the book. You have two horizontal lines that are actually the same length, but one has arrow tails pointing inward, and the other has arrow tails pointing outward.
And when you look at it, your System 1 just processes it automatically, and the result is the line with the outward fins just looks longer. It's immediate, undeniable. That's the System 1 impression.
Right. And at first, your System 2 probably just accepts that impression. You believe the bottom line is longer. But maybe you've seen this before, or maybe you get a ruler and measure them. Now your System 2 acquires new information, a fact. You know the lines are equal. You form a new belief based on that evidence.
Okay, so my System 2 now holds the correct belief. They are equal. But here's the kicker from the source.
The crucial point is, even when you know they are equal, you still see the bottom line as longer. Your System 2 belief hasn't changed the System 1 impression. You've chosen to trust the measurement, but you can't stop System 1 from generating the visual illusion. You can't just decide to see them as equal.
Wow. So the impression persists even when the belief contradicts it. That really shows System 1's autonomy.
It does. The insight is that System 1's output, the impression, isn't directly changed by System 2's knowledge. They operate somewhat independently.
So how do you avoid being fooled by it then, if you keep seeing it as longer?
You have to train your System 2. You learn to recognize the pattern lines with fins attached. And whenever you see that pattern, System 2 have to actively step in and say, okay, my eyes are telling me one is longer, but I know that's an illusion caused by these fins. Don't trust the visual impression in this specific case. Trust the rule. They are equal. It takes conscious effort to recall the knowledge and override the misleading impression. You're not fooled, but you still see the illusion.
That distinction between the raw impression and the considered belief is key. And the source argues this applies to our thinking too. Cognitive illusions.
Exactly. Illusions of judgment or feeling. The source shares an anecdote from when Kahneman was training in psychotherapy. His supervisor shared some clinical wisdom about a specific type of patient.
Which type was that?
A patient with a long history of failed treatments, who blames all the previous therapists, but who makes you, the current therapist, feel uniquely insightful, like you're the first one who truly understands them. They create a strong sense of connection and hope.
Okay. And the supervisor's advice
Was incredibly blunt. Do not even think of taking this patient on. Eject him. He is most likely a psychopath. Harsh, but based on experience, recognizing a dangerous pattern.
Ouch. So how does that relate to the visual illusion?
Well, the supervisor wasn't saying never trust your feelings of sympathy for a patient. He understood the intense feeling of connection and understanding the therapist would feel with this specific type of patient would be a System 1 reaction, automatic, powerful, maybe even compelling. That feeling of, wow, I can really help this person. That sense of unique rapport?
That's the System 1 impression.
Yes. And that feeling itself isn't necessarily fake or wrong in isolation. But the supervisor's point was that this strong, positive System 1 feeling, when it occurs in combination with a specific pattern of a long history of failed treatments and blaming others, is a major warning sign. Like the fins on the lines or a visual warning sign, this patient history plus intense connection pattern is a cognitive warning sign. It signals that the strong positive feeling might be a cognitive illusion, perhaps manipulative charm, rather than genuine connection.
Ah, so the pattern is the clue.
Exactly. The supervisor was teaching his students to train their System 2 to recognize that pattern, history plus feeling, and then deliberately mistrust and override the powerful System 1 feeling, however real it seemed. Don't believe the emotional illusion in this context.
So just like you learn to mistrust your eyes with the Miller-Lire fins, you learn to mistrust your strong positive gut feeling when faced with this specific patient profile.
Precisely. System 2 learns to spot the cognitive fins and disregard System 1's potentially misleading signal. Which leads to the really big question. Can we generally overcome these cognitive illusions?
And the source's verdict on that.
Is not encouraging, is the
Yeah.
phrase used. It's difficult. Because System 1 is automatic and always on, the errors it generates are hard to prevent. Often System 2 doesn't even realize an error has occurred. It might have no clue that the intuitive judgment was flawed.
So there's no trigger for System 2 to step in and fix it.
Right. And even when you do have a cue, like you know about a particular bias, or you remember the supervisor's warning, actually preventing the error requires constant monitoring and effort from System 2. You have to be actively vigilant.
And being constantly vigilant just isn't practical.
No. The source argues it would be incredibly mentally taxing, tedious, and frankly, System 2 is just too slow and inefficient to second-guess every single judgment and decision that System 1 handles quickly and usually quite well. Life would grind to a halt.
So we can't just put System 2 on permanent high alert.
Doesn't seem feasible. The proposed compromise is more strategic. Try to learn to recognize the types of situations where System 1's biases and illusions are most likely to trip you up. And then, in those specific situations, especially when the stakes are high, make a conscious effort to slow down, engage System 2, and try to avoid major errors.
Pick your battles for using that limited System 2 energy.
Exactly. It's a somewhat sobering message. Understanding the systems helps us spot potential pitfalls, but it doesn't magically make us immune to error. It mostly tells us when to try harder.
That makes sense. Not aiming for perfection, but for better awareness and targeted effort. And the source adds that it's often easier to see these biases in others than in ourselves.
Yes, that's another key premise. We're often better critics of other people's thinking than our own, which is another reason why having this language of System 1 and System 2 is useful. It gives us a framework for observing and talking about these patterns in others and maybe occasionally in ourselves.
Now, Kahneman is careful near the end of the chapter to head off a potential misunderstanding. He doesn't want people thinking these systems are actual little agents in our heads, right?
No, he's very clear on that.
Yeah.
System 1 and System 2 are metaphors, fictitious characters. They aren't literal entities or specific brain regions.
The language is descriptive, not explanatory.
Precisely. When he writes, System 2 calculates the product, it's just shorthand. It means mental arithmetic is an activity that feels voluntary, requires effort, interferes with other effortful tasks, and has those physical markers like pupil dilation.
And routine highway driving is left to System 1 just means.
It means that for an experienced driver, the actions of steering, braking, etc. become automatic and effortless, allowing them to do something else simultaneously, like talk.
And System 2 prevented James from reacting foolishly means.
It means James used effortful self-control to stop himself from acting on an initial impulse that he judged would have been unwise or inappropriate. It's just a way to describe the interplay of automatic impulses and deliberate control.
Okay, so they're useful labels, but why these specific, slightly impersonal names, System 1 and System 2? Why not just call them the automatic system and the effortful system? What's the advantage of the character approach?
He explains this too, and it's actually quite clever. It relates back to how our own minds work, particularly System 1. It turns out that sentences describing what an agent does, like System 2 calculates, are generally easier for us humans to grasp and remember than sentences describing abstract properties or activities, like mental arithmetic is effortful.
Huh. So our own System 1 prefers stories about agents doing things.
It seems so. We're naturally good at understanding narratives about characters with personalities and intentions. Think about how quickly you form an impression of a character in a story. Using System 1 and System 2 taps into this natural human tendency. It makes the concepts easier for Kahneman to explain, and crucially easier for us, the readers or listeners, to understand, remember, and think about.
Giving them names makes these abstract processes feel more concrete, like characters we can get to know.
Exactly. They become mental tools. And there's one final, very practical reason he gives for using these specific names, System 1 and System 2, over longer descriptions.
Right.
Pure efficiency. Again, related to System 2's limits.
Because they're shorter names.
Precisely. System 1 takes up less space in your working memory than the automatic system. Same for System 2 versus the effortful system. Keeping the term short frees up more of your limited mental bandwidth to actually think about the ideas being discussed, rather than wrestling with cumbersome labels.
That's brilliant. The names themselves are designed to reduce cognitive load.
It's a neat touch, isn't it? So yeah, think of them as nicknames. Bob and Joe, as he suggests later, characters whose personalities and habits we're learning about.
And he gives some final examples of how this language helps us talk about thinking.
Yeah, like saying, he had an impression, but some of his impressions are illusions. That clearly separates the System 1 output, impression, from a potential System 2 judgment about its validity, illusion.
Or, this was a pure System 1 response. She reacted to the threat before she recognized it. That captures the speed and automaticity of System 1, acting faster than conscious awareness.
It may be the most useful one for everyday life, something you might say to yourself. This is your System 1 talking. Slow down and let your System 2 take control.
That phrase perfectly captures the moment of self-awareness, recognizing a potentially biased impulse and consciously engaging effortful thought and control.
That really sums it up. Having the language helps you manage the process.
It gives you a handle on it, yeah. A way to identify when to trust the gut and when to hit the brakes and think more slowly.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into this foundational first chapter, we've met the key players. System 1 fast, automatic, effortless, intuitive, always on. The source of impressions and gut feelings, but also biases and illusions, and crucially, involuntary.
And System 2, slow, effortful, deliberate, the conscious self, requires attention, handles logic and complex tasks, exerts self-control, monitors System 1, and steps in when things get difficult, surprising, or potentially wrong. Most of the time, they work together seamlessly, an efficient tag team. System 2 often just goes along with System 1's quick takes. But System 2's ability to step in, to question, to calculate, to control impulses, that's vital for navigating complexity, novelty, and avoiding errors when System 1's shortcuts might lead us astray. Like learning to spot those fins that signal an illusion.
And understand this isn't about ditching System 1. It's amazing at what it does. It's more about appreciating its nature, its speed, its automaticity, its quirks, the fact you can't turn it off so your System 2 knows when to be a bit more skeptical, when to question that first reaction, or when an impression might just be a trick of the mind.
Exactly. It's not about being hypervigilant all the time. That's impossible. It's about learning to recognize those key moments or situations where engaging the slower, harder working System 2 is really worth the effort because accuracy or self-control really matters.
It's about knowing when the cognitive fins are present, signaling, hang on, my automatic response might be misleading here, time to think.
So, the final thought for you to consider. Now that you've been properly introduced to these two quite different characters operating in your head, System 1 and System 2, how might this change how you interpret your own gut feelings? Might you start questioning your first impressions more often, perhaps in specific contexts? And can you think of everyday situations where maybe, just maybe, you're relying on the quick and easy System 1 when the circumstances actually call for the more effortful, careful attention of System 2? Something to watch out for.
That interplay is happening constantly. Worth paying attention to.
That's been our deep dive into the two systems of the mind, from thinking fast and slow.